Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us for International Careers Week. I am really excited that we are welcoming Jeremiah Knight today from the State Department. I want to thank our sponsors, the Arthur M. Blank Foundation, the Longview Foundation, the Dennis and Phyllis Washington Foundation, and the High Stakes Foundation for bringing International Careers Week to you. So recently, Jeremiah served as Senior Advisor to the Undersecretary for Political Affairs and currently holds the position of Deputy Director in the Africa Bureau's Office of Public Diplomacy and Public Affairs. The Department of State's Bureau of African Affairs is focused on the development and management of U.S. policy concerning the African content. Jeremiah, welcome to International Careers Week.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Nikki. Thank you, Ali. And of course, Montana World Affairs Council for making this opportunity for me to talk to students. I love engaging with students.
Wonderful. Well, would you start off telling just a little bit about how did you get into this role? What was that path that brought you to the State Department?
It was a mistake. Never planned this. No, I'm originally from Connecticut, small town north of the capital. And as a student in high school, actually, I was really interested in international relations and the likes. And for 3 years, I was the club president of the Model UN. So we started working on all these resolutions. We had a chance to go to the UN in New York for the Model UN conference and meet a lot of other students that were interested in international relations and international affairs. So fast forward, I'm an undergrad, went to Morris College, and I was studying business, but I wanted to do international marketing. They didn't have an international component. So I did marketing, but I started hanging around students that were studying international relations. Started looking at that and checking out the languages. But then there was a diplomat in residence that was at my school that told me about the foreign service. I had no idea, you guys. Nobody in my family did international stuff. My only international exposure as a child was when I was about 12 or 13 for the first time. I flew out of the country because half of my family is from Jamaica. So I went to visit my family in Jamaica for Christmas, spent a month there. So that was the mix. And so because they didn't have that particular concentration that I wanted, they suggested maybe that I started, study abroad and get some exposure because in universities overseas had some international marketing courses. So I wound up going to the University of Westminster in London, studying international marketing and international relations. And then when I came back, I worked for almost 2 years in our international studies department at the school, and I dealt with international students coming in to the university. So that just exposed me to the whole entire international affairs, and then that made up my mind that my master's I wanted to do in international relations and public policy. So it started. So I'm showing you the trajectory from the
That's
time I
good.
was in high school all the way up into college, and then I had an opportunity to get a scholarship from a retired ambassadors association, diplomats association, for a master's in international relations, and then I got the Pickering Fellowship, which is a full ride for those that are interested in doing a master's in international affairs. So,
Yeah.
so I took the exam, I passed the exam, and then so many years later, I've been doing diplomacy.
That is so fantastic. So what I want to do is kind of back up just a little bit.
Okay.
And my first question for you is tell us, what is the Foreign Service and what kind of work do diplomats do at the U.S. Department of State? So we're gonna start basic and then we're gonna dive in.
So that's the question my family still asks me all the time. What do you do for a living? Most of them think I work for the State Department of Connecticut, but it's not the situation. So the Department of State is, to break it down into the most simplest ways, is that foreign policy is created by the Secretary of State and our President of the United States. And so basically, what is foreign policy? How we relate with countries, trade, education, development, and the likes. Who makes these items? That comes from the top. And then who actually implements them? Diplomats. And where do they do it? In these buildings called embassies overseas. But the first and number one responsibility of the State Department is to look over the welfare and well-being of Americans that are overseas. So most Americans know us because of our consular work. So like when you need a passport, if you're overseas and you lose your passport, you need another one. If you happen to, get sick and you're in a hospital and you need to have help, or sometimes people get into trouble and they go into prison, and so we have to go visit them. And in times, so that's our most important thing, is that we uh we we do that. That's our main responsibility, to make sure that we are helping the security and safety of American citizens overseas. That's our number one priority. And then after that, we break it down into different aspects of political work, economic work. Um, and we deal with also what I normally did. My career was public diplomacy and public affairs. So sharing American culture, sharing American stories, doing cultural exchange, and educational, bringing students to have them study in the U.S. And we have students in the U.S. that study abroad in other countries. We're involved in that. Hope
Oh,
that
that's fantastic. That's great. Okay. No, that's a wonderful introduction. So now we're going to go to the next layer of what you work on, and that is, what is the Bureau of African Affairs and how does it work to strengthen US-Africa relations?
All right, so this is my second stint working in the Africa Bureau. So just to briefly, so I won't bore you guys, talk about the structure of the State Department. So we have all these layers of leadership, but mainly we have regional bureaus that deal with different parts of the world. So we have our European Bureau, we have our Western Hemisphere, which includes like the Caribbean, North America, and South America. Then we have another one that covers all of Asia and the Pacific Islands. Um, so we have a regional. So this one is the Africa Bureau, deals with all of sub-Saharan Africa, everything not including North Africa, which is like Algeria, Egypt, Morocco, and the likes, right? And so the Africa Bureau's main focus is to basically help implement our foreign policy when it relates to Africa. So like I told you, from the consular stuff, from the education, from the political and all that. In particular, what do we do in my office is that we support all the public diplomacy and public affairs initiatives. So dealing with all of our social media tools that for embassies that are in the continent, and also the Africa Bureau itself, dealing with all of our educational exchanges. We deal with young African leaders. We bring them here for exchanges so they can meet their counterparts. We also deal with sports diplomacy. So we bring people that are American sports. We bring them to to African continent to teach kids how to play different sports that they might not necessarily do all the time, like baseball, or some places where basketball is not that popular. We'll bring a basketball athlete there. And then we do culinary diplomacy too, sharing American culture through food and the likes, to different places on the continent.
Oh, that's very cool. Okay. Have you been stationed in Africa? Can you
I
tell us
have.
a little bit about some of those posts?
So I was stationed one time in Africa. I was stationed in South Sudan, the newest country in the whole world, right? And as you guys know, and a lot of conflict, dealing with a lot of ethnic fighting and clashing. So when I went, it was a very challenging time to do the public outreach and the likes, because of all the fighting and the clashing between the president's clan, his tribe, and the vice president's tribe. But one of the things I worked on was really cool, was trying to get the young people that were of all the different ethnic groups to stop using tribalism as a way to be conflicted with each other and to unite as one people, right? And so, for the first time in history, I worked with my colleagues in different agencies and also with different embassies to create a festival that dealt with peace and non-conflict, right? And I thought maybe if we can get maybe 100 people to 500 people would be like a success. And we actually got over 3,000 people to show up. And so they were performing music, they had artists there, they had fashion designers showing their stuff, they had poetry going, and it was just a great 2 days of celebrating. Whatever your tribe was, we were all one people. And to this day, they actually still do the Peace Festival.
Wow, that's amazing. That must have been quite the event, first to put on, but then second just to be a part of and to see. And That's pretty incredible. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
So, what are some key skills needed to work in foreign service, especially at the US Department of State?
So one of the key skills is to be comfortable with the unknown. So like our job, we're constantly changing countries, we're constantly changing leadership, we're constantly changing our jobs, what we do. So you have to be able to be thrown into an environment and given little instruction and being able to excel. That is one of the main. I don't go into like you have to know these languages. You have no, no, no. The fact is that being creative and having the ability to be flexible and being okay with not being comfortable all the time. That is one of the main things.
Ooh, that's really good. So, what are some of the challenges that you have faced throughout your career?
Funny, you have actual uh, challenges when it comes down to threats. And when you're in countries, for instance, I was in Pakistan during around the time of the Marriott bombing back in the day when the Taliban came and went to the Marriott hotel and they had a whole truck full of explosives. And that was like 4 blocks from my house. So it blew all my doors and all my windows. And they're like, so you have that. And same thing when I was in South Sudan, there were threats with like lots of killings and stuff in the capital. But that's not always the case. That's I mean that was a few places. But I've been in places like I just was served before I came back to Washington I was in the Marshall Islands as our deputy chief. And Marshall Islands is a beautiful country near Hawaii. And my house was on stilts above the lagoon, and you got to see the ocean set and water coming into your house. So I mean, those are but challenges, but the challenge with that is you're far away from your family and your friends. So you have to be comfortable. Sometimes you miss, like, sometimes my nieces or my brothers will have birthdays and I'm not there for that because you're away. But it has its perks too because you get to do some of the most incredible things that you will, like the king of the Marshall Islands invited me to his coronation. Like, when do you ever get invited to a coronation? I mean, amazing. So you do have some clear challenges, sometimes with resources. We have to do sometimes a little bit more than what we had signed up to do because there's not a lot of people around to do the work. And you do have to work really hard, but I try to make sure that when I work hard, we have just as much fun.
That's great. Okay, I'm going to come back to some cultural aspects and asking just about some of the fun, the food, all those pieces. But first, I want to come back to the Bureau of African Affairs. What projects are you working on now that are particularly interesting to you?
Yeah, so we're around the time where we're selecting our young African leaders. It's called the Washington Mandela Fellowship, and so they're picking them. So all the posts are interviewing all these prospective young African leaders that participate in this 3 week fellowship that they come to the U.S. And a lot of these people afterwards, you see that they are the business leaders of their country. They go into running their governments and being leaders in their government. Like, so it's a great opportunity to engage and pick out those, because I did that when I was in South Sudan. I actually, because a lot of the South Sudanese were refugees in Uganda and also in Kenya, I got a chance to travel there and interview them and engage with them. So that's one of the things that we're definitely working on. Another thing that we're doing is in the creative economy. So the creative economies is big in West Africa and also in Kenya. So the arts like music and television and film industry, and connecting those with their American counterparts, and because it makes sense. It's a great market for our American companies to find markets there for them, but also it gives them exposure to American markets. So that's a really interesting piece that we're in right now too. And then engaging with institutions of higher education over there, trying to help them find the best practices that may help improve their higher educational systems. That's some of the things that we're doing in that space. We do a lot of virtual classes too that our Young African Leaders Network does, where they provide free online courses on a number of topics that they can make themselves smart on and utilize during their matriculation in school, and also through their private businesses and their entrepreneurship.
That's incredible. We have some questions coming in from some of our students. So
Okay.
I'm gonna switch gears again. So Thompson Falls says, have you ever been involved in bringing a professional athlete to the United States?
So we normally do vice versa. We bring professional U.S. athletes to other countries, and we also we bring over performers to other countries. Like one of the coolest ones I did was when I was in Jamaica. I got a chance to bring Misty Copeland, who is, the queen of ballet, over to Jamaica to perform, and not only just to perform, to also do master classes with young dancers in Jamaica. It was amazing. So I
Wow.
got to actually get one-on-one interaction with her and watch her do what she does best, which is be amazing. So that was a great opportunity with that.
That sounds like one of the job perks, I would imagine. Oh my goodness. Did you pick up any ballet skills?
Not at I watched it and recorded.
Ah, all right. Oh, that's great. So Gardner is asks, do you think there will be an end to the Sudan civil war? We're going from changing gears again.
That is a Gardner, very good question. So as I said, I was actually in South Sudan, but yes, still with Sudan itself. Um, we are working really hard with our international colleagues to address our international partners throughout the world to address the issue and the conflict in Sudan, which is very serious and very severe. It was interesting. Like about 8 9 years ago, we were more concerned about South Sudan, and Sudan was the more stable country. And now it's kind of like turning the page where Sudan is the more unstable situation. In South Sudan, it's a little bit more stable. But we want both of them to be stable places for a number of reasons. For the issue of refugees, people don't want to be displaced from their homes. I mean, they have lots of natural resources, especially oil, in both countries in which they could utilize to help grow their economies and make stable places for people to live. So it is in our best interest to work with them to have parties come together and talk it out. And I think that we've been really engaged. The Africa Bureau has been really engaged over the last year or so, and more than last year, but in particularly in the last year and a half, trying to address those issues.
That's wonderful. Um, Reed Points asks, what type of education should one get if they wish to get involved in foreign affairs?
So our foreign diplomatic corps is a little bit different than a lot of other diplomatic corps from different countries. A lot of them require you to have a degree in international relations. You have to come in with the language, but we have what is called the Foreign Service Institute, which is like this university for diplomats. It's on a huge campus, and you go there and they train you in whatever they need to train you in, right? So I had been assigned as a diplomat, and I had been assigned to my first post, which was the Dominican Republic, but I had to spend 9 months of training before I actually went out to go do my work. So to answer your question, it really doesn't matter what your degree is in, right? So one of my best friends in the Foreign Service has a theology degree, and she's a diplomat, right? And I know some friends that are lawyers. I know some friends that are educators. They have degrees in education. What you need to do is pass the Foreign Service exam. No matter what your degree is, no matter what your background is, you just have to pass. It's a two-part exam. You have a written assessment, and then you have an oral assessment, which is a whole day of examination. If you pass them and pass them with good scores, then they offer you an opportunity to enter the Foreign Service, and then they train you into whatever you. And every time you go to a new assignment, you have an opportunity also to get additional training. So the training never ends. You're constantly in a learning education mode in the Department of State, because we always go back. And I miss being on campus. I want to be a student again and study. They haven't let me do that lately.
Oh, that's great. What are some of the most difficult parts of your job at the State Department?
The most difficult parts of my job at the State Department. Sometimes, some of the most difficult at times would be, I've been in a country where I didn't fully know the language, right? And so that is complicated. When you don't fully know the language, even though some people that you interact with may speak English, it's kind of complicated when you don't understand it because you can't really understand the news and this and that. But other complications sometimes is that I would say that we're a little bit slow at reacting to things, and I think moving a little bit fast. I'm one who likes to have fast. I understand why sometimes they're slow to respond to different issues and policies, but moving a little bit faster, I think sometimes, and I think our new Secretary of State has mentioned that, Marco Rubio, about making us more nimble and having the ability to respond faster. So I look forward to seeing some of those improvements in that area. And then parts of our job, sometimes you have to understand, like, Washington is a little bit different. Being overseas, there's really a blur between time off and time on. So you're never really off as a diplomat overseas, whether you're at a restaurant, whether you're working in your office. And a lot of times after doing your 9 to 5, you have receptions and activities to go to in the evening. So sometimes you're just tired because you work 8 hours a day and then you're at a reception for another 2 or 3 hours and then you get home late at night and then you have to get up the next morning. So sometimes it gets a little bit difficult.
I can imagine. Do you do more office or field work? And what does that work entail? And so maybe also talk about the shift between being in the United States versus abroad.
So in the United States, it's office work. It's not a lot of being outside of your office, but overseas, in particular, because I'm a by trade, I guess I want to say trade, but by my cone of expertise, I'm a public diplomacy diplomat, and my team knew that I would get upset if I stayed in the office every day. You cannot engage with public by sitting in the office. Your job is to be out at schools. Your job is to be out with, with people in the entrepreneurial field and all different sectors. And plus, a lot of times the public affairs officer was the one that followed or accompanied the ambassador to everywhere they went. So I would always be at the back. And so if I wasn't doing my own stuff, I was with the ambassador. So out of a 5-day period, I normally was in the office about no more than 3 hours a day per se. Most of my time was out in the field because that's what you do as a public affairs. But then I switched my last job as the deputy chief of mission. You're more like the person that runs the embassy while the ambassador has the opportunity to do a lot of these engagements. So I spent more time in the office, but my ambassador liked for me to go with her everywhere too. So I was not only trying to run the embassy, but I was also out quite a bit. So generally speaking, there's some jobs that are strictly internal. So like we have our management officers and we have some other people that provide security for the embassy and the likes, and their jobs are more internal. But my jobs have normally been more externally facing.
And just a follow-up question to that, how frequently are you overseas?
So I just moved back about a year and a half ago. I was overseas my last stint for 10 years. So I left in 2013 and I came back at the end of 2023. Um, and then before that, I was back in the US for like 2.5, 3 years. But then before that, I was away for like 7, 8 years. So it's normally what you do is you do do like 3 or 4 tours away, and then you come back and do like 1 or 2 years, like 2 or 3 years back in Washington. That's the normal rotation.
That's the normal rotation. Are you fluent in any other language?
Yeah, so the funny thing, you guys, from the time I was, I think, in ninth grade until my second year of university, I studied French. So, because remember back in the day when I told you when I was in the Model UN, I wanted to learn French because French was the language of the UN, right? But I never got posted to a French post, a French assignment. I never used it. So then I wound up studying Spanish, and I'm 100% fluent in Spanish. My French is about 70% fluent still. Then when I was in the Marshall Islands, I started learning their language, which is Marshallese. And then I know quite a bit of Portuguese.
Amazing. Oh, okay, so this is great. This one of our students from Big Sky says that they're from the Congo and they
Oh,
were wondering if the Bureau is looking into the conflict that is happening there.
what a timely question. Very timely. And we have been working on that issue day by day over the last week or so. As we know, the situation is getting very serious in Goma and the likes. And also our embassy was on an order of departure. So we had to evacuate some of our diplomats that were in Kinshasa. And we are definitely working with our regional partners to address the conflict that's happening there with the displacement of people and the like. So yes, we are not only aware of it, we are actively working, and the Secretary of State is definitely engaged on those issues.
My goodness. What other countries have you visited as a result of your job?
As a result of my job. Okay, so overall, because when you're working abroad too, you wind up visiting your friends in other places too, right? So that's one of the cool things about it, is that then you have all these people that live everywhere. You can stay for free in their houses because you have this network. So overall, I calculated it. There's an app that is called like Where I've Been, and so I keep track of like everywhere I've traveled to, and I think I've been to about 70 countries, and I have lived on every continent except for Antarctica. So I've lived in North America, South America, and the Caribbean. I've lived in Africa. I've lived in Europe. I've lived in Asia. I've lived in South Asia. I've lived in the Oceania, the Pacific Islands.
Wow. Is there a post that you could potentially fulfill that Antarctica?
Wait. I almost had the opportunity because when I was living in Santiago, Chile, there was a cruise liner that ran into problems near Antarctica, and we were supposed to fly down there and meet them, but I didn't get a chance to go on the flight, so I almost got Antarctica.
Oh my goodness. Okay. What is the best or worst? Let's go with best and worst cultural food that you have tried.
First of all, I'm not going to call anybody's food horrible.
So diplomatic of you.
It's just not. Some foods are just not of my palate. Okay. Uh, but I am a lover of food. So I find good things almost everywhere I work. And the cool thing about it, I think about 8 or 9 years ago, I started writing for a Dominican magazine called Manhart. One second, I'll show you.
Oh yeah.
So this is the magazine I've been writing for, and it's about my culinary. It's about my culinary travels around the world. So I have a column that I write, and it's published every. And this is my first article they wrote about me.
Look at that.
Right? It's gonna get messed up with that whole thing that we have there. But yeah, so I write every quarter in the magazine, and it's about my culinary explorations around the world. And so I love to go to countries and do two things everywhere I go, whether it's for work. I like to go to a very fancy restaurant to try some very fancy food from the country. And then I like to go to the grandpa shops that make the really home style food to try a local cuisine that's very local. So I did all of that. And through writing through the magazine and my exploration, then this job has afforded me the opportunity. I've written my first cookbook because I love to cook. And so it's going to be out. I just got a email today from my publisher. It should be out this summer, by the end of this summer.
Congratulations.
On my social media, Instagram, I always share a recipe from different parts of the world, and I show people how to cook the recipes.
Oh my goodness. Well, this sounds like something we're gonna have to follow.
Okay.
But that doesn't answer the question. So what are some of, and I'm gonna actually pull and tease out because I have a follow-up question to this, but maybe you could just share an experience where, well, we'll stick to like some of the best.
You're like a journalist. What is this?
Stick to this. Tell me about an experience in, it doesn't matter what country, that you were just absolutely blown away, that maybe from the taste, from the atmosphere. I know it's hard to choose one, but it doesn't
So
have
I'll give you two experiences. So one experience where I was just like, wow, this is absolutely just amazing. I think one time when I was in Peru, I love Peruvian food, right? And I remember the ambassador's secretary there was a friend of mine from way back, and I had went there for a short visit for work, and she took me out took me out to dinner because I was visiting, and she brought me to this really exquisite restaurant that was really old school, looked like it had been around for like 200 years, this building. And they have a dish called ají de gallina, which is one of my favorite Peruvian dishes. It's like this chicken with this cream sauce and it's spicy. And when I ate that food, it was just like I was in heaven. Absolutely amazing. Some amazing cuisine there, and Peru is one of my favorite places to eat at. But then juxtapose that, you know, I was one time with my boss, the assistant secretary, and we were going to the rainforest and same Peru. And I never forget, we were going with this team of Peruvians, and they had river fish ceviche. So mind you, this is raw fish, and this is out in the middle of the hot tropical forest, and they're offering you to eat this,
Hot, hot raw fish.
and you cannot say no because that's disrespectful. I ate that fish and got so sick.
Oh
I
my
was
goodness.
so sick afterwards. It was not funny.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so here's my follow-up question. What advice do you have for students when they are in a new place, um, for searching or finding out or finding a food experience that will be memorable? So maybe just beyond the regular first thing that pops up on Google or on Yelp. Like how do you find these experiences?
So you guys, if you're with your mom and dad and you're traveling to different places, here's one thing you can do that's easy. Well, it's easy and great, and it's very interesting. Like a lot of places I go, for instance, when I went to Fiji, I took a Fijian cooking class. I spent like 4 hours. You pay for this little class. It wasn't too much, but then you got not only to taste local cuisine, real local cuisine, not the stuff that you find, like you said, in Google and stuff, but then you get to cook it yourself and learn how to make it with a local chef. So I say, whenever you have the opportunity, if you have enough time when you're traveling, book a cooking class in the countries that you're in.
That's excellent. I love that advice. Okay, we have just a few more minutes, and we're gonna switch gears back to Gardner students want to know what courses or activities could students in high school or college take that would help them to get a job within foreign policy?
So, like I said, when I was in high school, I did the Model UN, right? So it got me interested in learning how international relations works, how resolutions are made, and how you get buy-in from other countries and to agree on a particular cause that you're trying to push forward. That's really important in diplomacy. When you're in university, I would say if your school has any international studies courses, to take those. Definitely hone in on taking a language. And then if there's a government or public policy course, because the key about policy work, working as a diplomat, is that we don't write really long papers. You write really short, succinct memos. And there's actually an art in how to properly do that. So if you have an opportunity to learn how to take a whole bunch of information that you get and put it into a 2 or 3 page document, that is super important, because in our job, we come by so much information, we don't have time to go through 10, 15 pages of writing. We need to find something that's short and to the point and has all the facts. So having writing courses are extremely important. And becoming a polished diplomat, you have to know how to write. And then if you had any public speaking classes, definitely take public speaking, because as a diplomat, you will be constantly asked to address, just like now, address a group of people, whether it's students, whether it's other diplomats, whether it's government officials. You're constantly put on the spot where you have to engage and talk with.
That's great advice. All right, do you have any regrets in your career? Do you think they are large enough to deter people from joining your line of work?
I have had the best experience being a diplomat. I love my job. It's service to your country. This is a wonderful and honorable way to serve America, because not the only service, there's not serving the military is not the only way that you can provide service to your country. And being a diplomat, being the face of America in places where people have never even engaged or encountered an American, and sharing our ideals and our culture with them, is honorable, and I think is a job that you would never regret.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Okay. Reed Point is really curious about going back to some of those culinary components. So where exactly can we find these recipes?
I'm giving you it right now. I'm writing it in the chat. That's my
Ah,
Instagram. I share recipes all the time.
oh,
Uh,
that's so great. That's so great. Well, when we get you out to Montana, maybe we can have you do a cooking
Of
class
course,
with us. I
of
think that would
course.
be,
Would
I
love to
think
do
that
that.
pretty, pretty incredible. Pretty incredible. Um, all right, so let's just go back one more time back to the Bureau of African Affairs because I think like this is very very important. Um, where do you see the Bureau working in the next few years? Oh, we already have people planning to do some of your cooking. I'm seeing in the chat. So, but where where do you see that Africa like the focus of the Bureau in the next few years?
I mean, the focus of our current secretary made it clear about like, making sure that whatever we do through our work in Africa is definitely about securing American interests abroad, making sure America's placed first, and in regards to our economic advancements in country, doing trade and the likes that helps promote American businesses abroad, making sure that the security of Americans is the first and foremost thing. Also, we have a booming youth population in Africa. Africa is on par to have the largest youth population in the world in the next, I think, 15 to 20 years. So there's a lot of youth that are there and finding ways how to engage with those audiences and help them with issues of governance and the likes. So that's I think that those are some of the main key areas. We will lose out if we do not know how to properly engage with the youth audiences in the continent of Africa. And so that's what I said, talking about creative economies and the likes, and finding space for this new generation of Africans.
That's fantastic. Um, it's pretty exciting to hear. And so, how can students in the United States um, start to engage in that respect, even if they're not part of the Foreign Service? Is there any advice that you would have to our students to get to know African culture better or like help support what you're doing in the State Department?
Well, I mean, there definitely a lot of communities have like their affinity groups with like the African societies that you might find locally in your own neighborhoods and the likes. Also, we have a number of internship opportunities that are provided, whether they're virtual interns that come here to Washington. We have interns that go overseas and work in our embassies. So if you're interested in working in the continent of Africa, you have that. So like my very first internship at the State Department was in the Africa Bureau's International Visitors Program. And so I actually interned in Washington working on African issues. And then I didn't touch African issues until another 15 years down the road. But it was, it sparked my interest in it. So finding that way to volunteer. And then in some of your, like we just said, that there's a student right here from their families from the Congo, getting to talk to your fellow students and engage with their culture and trying to stick yourself in for a local meal in their homes. I mean, that's another opportunity. So I think that there's definitely lots of opportunities. My colleague Nicole has information in regards to the student internship, so she would be more than happy to share that with you all. And then just reaching out, then having me there, and I can like do the connections too if I come to Montana.
That's excellent. Nicole, if you'll send that our way, we can share that with all of our students and get that out there. Reed Point wants to know, do you get to choose what regions of the world you get posted in?
Good, very good question. So your first two tours are what we call assigned tours. So basically they give you a list of like 10, 15 assignments, and then you rank them in order of your preference, and then they give you what they give you. Then after that, your second tour, then you kind of navigate yourself and you kind of pitch yourself out to different embassies and different bureaus and try to get a job, and it is landed that way. So you kind of have to navigate your own career on your own. There are some people that hone in on certain regions of the world, and that's what they do for their whole entire career. I kind of had like commitment issues, so I kind of jumped around everywhere. I've done like the Western Hemisphere, I've done Africa, I've done Europe, I mean, I've done Asia, I've done Southeast Asia, Oceania. So I've kind of hopped around about whatever different things were interesting to me. I just jumped in the opportunity.
Yep, that's incredible. And how many years of education did you have before you entered the Foreign Service?
So let's be very clear. The requirements of being a diplomat, according to the US government, is that you only need a high school diploma. You don't even need a college degree. But that in order to properly prepare you, you probably need a few years of college or university. I did undergraduate and graduate, so it was 6 years. Then I did 1 year in our Foreign Service Institute before I went out. So it was a total of 7 years of training before I actually went out to my first assignment.
That's great. Okay. This is the final question, Jeremiah. Thank you so much for being with us. But what advice would you have to students that are interested in foreign affairs?
My biggest advice is just be open to like opportunities. So do an internship, volunteer somewhere. If you don't like it, good. You know, you didn't like it, right? At least you knew. So my thing is like when it comes down to these things, when international relations, international affairs, just try different things out, and it won't hurt to try and learn from those experiences. I mean, for instance, I thought because my father was a civil engineer, I wanted to be one. So I did 2 years of Saturdays going to University of Connecticut's pre-engineering program, and I realized I hated engineering and I never want to be an engineer. So so you learn from trial and error, and you guys are young and you have the world before you. And I say, if you're interested, read up. I was a fanatic as a elementary high school student. I would read my whole entire geography and history books because I just was interested. I was like a nerd when it came down to that. I would read all that stuff. My father ordered National Geographic, and so we used to get the month. And every single month, I would read that magazine from cover to cover, learning about different cultures, learning about different places in the world, because it was just I was interested. So go after your interests, try things out. If you don't like it, it is perfectly fine. Keep on trying.
That is incredible, incredible advice. Thank you. And there is a note from the Big Sky High School International Club. They are starting a project with a primary school in Nambia where they will create kits to build solar power equipment for the school and the community. And they're wondering if they could possibly contact the Bureau.
Well, I mean, yes, definitely contact us, but more importantly, we can put you in contact with our embassy in Namibia and see if there's something that you could, yeah. So contact, I think Nicole left, sent her information there, but to contact us, and we would love to do that intersection with our embassy in Namibia and you guys and see what can happen.
Oh, that's incredible. Well, thank you so much. And it's exciting to hear about your world, about the culinary expertise, about the State Department, about the Bureau of African Affairs, and also about what our students in Montana are interested in and their questions as well. So what a treat to have you join us today at International Careers Week, Jeremiah. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you guys for having me. It was a pleasure talking with all you guys.
What a treat. Thank you and have a great day. We hope to see you in Montana.
Yes, most definitely.
All right.
Take care.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Goodbye. Thank you.